Have you ever seen something from the corner of your eye that wasn't there when you looked again? How about hearing from a friend of a friend while they were hiking in the mountains? They thought they saw something impossible, but whenever they spoke to a ranger, there appeared to be a simple explanation, but it just left you a little bit unsatisfied. My name is Jack, and this is my colleague Chris, and we're senior wardens for the Creature Conservation Initiative. We protect the world from the creatures of superstition and myth, but more importantly, protect those same creatures from the world. So, hey Chris, how you doing?
Hey Jack, happy to be here. Happy to be with you again. I'm very excited to have this podcast now. It's exciting to be able to tell people about these things.
Oh, it's wonderful, isn't it? It's one of those things where we can finally talk about what happened at the end of the day.
Exactly.
Well, today we are doing our Halloween special.
We are. It's also kind of our origin story.
Yeah, in a way, actually. It was pretty much the first time you and I worked together on this one.
Exactly.
But before we get all into that, we should probably tell people what we're talking about today. Would you like to?
We are talking about ghouls today, and of course they are in modern media and literature. There are many different things that are called ghouls, but what we are talking about today is a humanoid monster that originated in the Middle East, as far as I'm aware. I'm always a bit hazy on the theoretical stuff, you know me. Maybe you can introduce them better than me.
Sounds like a good idea to me. Yes, these are Middle Eastern kind of creatures. Now, what we kind of think of as ghouls in terms of like modern literature and movies and the like are usually, like hunched over, malnourished, pale, evil little creatures that are kind of like the easy animals to deal with, in the easy monsters to deal with when we're talking about games and things. You're not a hugely far away assessment if that's what you think they are. They are usually quite pale and emaciated and nasty, but they also have a really, really interesting kind of origin in terms of where they first kind of popped up in our history. You were right in saying that they're in the Middle East. They're kind of demonic humanoid monsters that didn't actually turn up in the Quran, but were more specifically mentioned in, I believe, and I'm sorry if I'm butchering the pronunciation, but the Hadith, which is the record of the Prophet Muhammad's writings. But they also popped up in the Pei and Tamil mythology as various different types.
Got around a bit.
Yeah, they were all over the place, these kind of things. They were mostly connected with missing people in the desert, or missing travelers who should have turned up and never kind of came back again. It's one of those kind of like scavenger type creatures.
That's a thing we see a lot, actually. Creatures that lure people in, lure them away from the town or city or way or whatever, and then dispose of them where nobody can see it. And then, we see that a lot in different creatures around the world, actually.
Well, these mythical creatures, I mean, it's one of the ways in which they have remained hidden for all these millennia, unnoticed. But their deeds don't go unnoticed. Or at least this is kind of how they were seen in ancient times. They didn't really start getting associated with graveyards and basically, unfortunately, grave robbing until around the 18th century, which is when a lot of Middle Eastern texts and things were being translated by Europeans. And it kind of became a little bit more interesting to move them away from the desert and uninhabited places and ruins, and moving them to graveyard and battlefield devourers, finding carrion. Everything that we actually know about them, the real truth, that we obviously, as the people that we are, know is they are actually hunters. Where we tend to find them usually is in kind of open, I don't want to say wastelands, but that kind of open space where there isn't much around to disturb them. They tend to hunt individuals who are maybe traveling large distances unnoticed, but it has become a little bit more difficult for them to hunt and gather, sustenance, because, well, we move in vehicles now, and whereas when I tell you a little bit more about what they actually are like, how they're actually put together, and what they look like, they're not really that. They don't really have like can openers for hands. So trying to crack open that Jeep that's driving past, a bit difficult.
Yeah, of course, which is a problem because that they still need food, and that sometimes leads them towards cities and towns and of people, and that can be quite dangerous for everyone involved. And of course, now we have a podcast and everything, but back then we wanted to keep things more secret than we do today. So that was another concern as well.
Yeah, very much so. We are kind of seeing them migrating a little bit closer to civilization. Luckily, we have a pretty good handle on them, and we don't allow them to leave their lairs very easily. And we actually even have our own kind of, you might even say, like, reserves for them, in a weird way. But we try to avoid allowing them anywhere near cities because, well, as I say, modern equipment, modern technology, we can keep, they're not really designed for that world. You do have to remember, though, they are still quite dangerous creatures, and your partying clothes when you're going out to the club on a Friday night is not really much protection against the claws of a ghoul.
That's true.
Would you like to know a little bit more about kind of like the history? Like I say, they have been mentioned in religious texts and things, but would you like to know a little bit more about the previous ideas of the ghoul?
Oh yeah, sure. I have a bit of half knowledge about them. So one thing that always fascinated me is that they, as far as I know, can shapeshift.
Yes, that is the old belief that they can shapeshift. There's a really, really interesting idea that they are able to shapeshift into the form of the last person or thing that they ate.
Okay.
If they were to eat one of us, potentially, they could take our place. Or at least that's kind of the idea.
That's what we were worried about back then, because we could fight them and shoot them and whatever if we had to, but there was always that feeling among the newer agents of what if one of us is one of them?
Yeah, that was definitely a worry for you guys. I mean, you were one of the containment team.
Exactly.
And like I've said before in the past, they have been mostly relegated to Middle East and deserty kind of landscapes, those kind of areas. So they are very much a worry if you're ever posted in those kind of regions. And the idea that they can shapeshift does worry people.
Of course.
But so far, we've not actually seen much evidence of them being able to successfully shapeshift. There's always something weird about how they transform that just kind of gives them away. Yeah. So luckily, we've never had a containment breach as a result of there was a ghoul who joined part of the team. Yeah, the really interesting thing, like the previous kind of ideas about them, there were supposed to be only females. So they were known as Mother Ghūl or Aunt Ghūl. And those ghouls would lure hapless characters, usually men, over to their homes or their lairs and just devour them whole, as if they were able to entice people in.
Yeah.
Again, based on all the ghouls I've ever seen in my life, I'm not pretty sure how they entice anyone in.
Well, people have all kinds of preferences, let's call it that.
Hey, no judging.
Exactly.
And in the past, they've talked about them being able to transform into things like hyenas and somehow trick people into following them into the wastes and, again, devour those people.
Yeah.
So, but again, I've got that kind of question of Who's following a damn hyena?
Well, I don't know. Did people hunt hyenas at some point? I'm not sure.
They might have. I mean, I'm pretty sure, if you're hungry enough, you'll hunt anything.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, it's probably lost in translation, lost in time somewhere, and people like to make things up and dramatize things a bit.
well, again, I was just sitting there thinking, if I was, say, in trouble and I was in the desert and completely alone or anything like that, and a hyena came up to me, I would personally turn around and go, that's a bad sign. I wouldn't go, oh, that hyena is here to help me get back to civilization.
Yeah, you'd probably go the exact opposite direction.
I certainly wouldn't want to just follow it. But again,
Exactly.
who knows, maybe different cultures, but as you say, lost in translation of these kind of different ideas. If we go back to this whole idea of they can transform into the last person that they devoured, is that only humans? Why is it only humans? They surely would have been able to transform into the different animals that they last ate. Maybe the last thing they ate was a hyena. Who knows?
Who knows? Could be. Maybe there's some kind of restriction that it has to match the basic body shape. I don't know.
They have a tendency to avoid the light of day.
Which is a very good thing for us.
Yes, very much so. It means that they are one less thing to worry about during the daytime, but it does mean that they are very difficult to find at night.
Yes. If there's one thing they can, it's hiding.
The reason why they do blend in very, very well is that they are quite stealthy creatures. They're bipedal, hairless, and they tend to crawl more than they do walk.
Yeah, it's quite creepy to see, actually.
Yeah. They kind of look very emaciated and, kind of pale, dry, scaly skin. But the main thing that kind of identifies them away from an emaciated, diseased, unfortunate person is they have very, very sharp teeth and claw-like fingers. But their bodies are, as I've said already, designed for stealth and sneaking around rather than direct confrontation. So usually you're not going to see them until the very last moment, which is why we've talked about how you actually kill a ghoul, and usually you have to kill them with the first strike. So if we're talking back in the days of swords and spears and shields, you had one chance to take them out. Otherwise,
Yes.
It was kind of viewed that you had one chance to kill them. That was it. But it was by the sounds of it, it's more a case of if you don't kill them on the first go, they're going to get you.
Yeah. And also, they're quite resilient.
Yes.
It's one of the rare creatures where we actually authorize use of firearms because it doesn't kill them easily. It's just an amount of force that we need to make them even feel anything.
Yeah, there is a lot of... You have to shoot them a lot.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot to just stop them. Even some of the higher caliber weapons, it takes a lot to kind of bring them down. So
Exactly, and if it doesn't kill them on the spot, then they'll usually recover quite quickly.
yes, so we tend to do a lot more containment than we do elimination when it comes to these. But unfortunately, it has befallen to us in the past that we have had to take some of these things down, especially when they've managed to get themselves into populated areas.
Yes.
Sometimes there's just no way to contain them. And like I've said in previous episodes, we only kill to save a life.
That's true. Unfortunately, that's sometimes a scenario that we have to deal with.
But if we circle back round again to kind of the beliefs, so the origins of these, if you're talking about the Islamic faith, they're believed to have been devils that passed divine secrets to soothsayers on Earth and were then banished from the heavenly realms.
Oh.
And during their fall from these heavenly realms, they were supposedly burned by comets and landed changed in the deserts of our world, which is why they've kind of got that disfigured and emaciated kind of look to them. But also, there's some talk that they were actually jinn spirits that delighted in tricking, trapping, and devouring people. And this is the form in which they've taken on. But again, I'm not a spiritual kind of person. I couldn't tell you if this is how they actually came into the world, but as far as I'm concerned, I find them very, very fascinating, very, very dangerous, evil little beasts that personally I always hate every time we have to go and contain them.
Yeah.
Every single operation really it's one of those ones that I just dread doing.
It's always stressful, always dangerous.
There's some interesting stuff about the modern idea of ghouls, though, when, as I say, there was translations in the 18th century of Middle Eastern texts, and as is usually the case with history, there's sometimes some changing around, there's, misinterpretations, mistranslations, and they became creatures, lived underground in subterranean ruins, and only ever emerged to feed on people, as well as they are supposed to be intelligent enough and capable of speech. Again, I've never really had a conversation with them. They're not exactly that, eloquent.
Yeah.
But in my experience, they don't really tend to, want to ask us for a quick chat.
Yeah.
Usually they would prefer to jump off and try and eat your face.
Exactly. You wouldn't want to discuss the latest Star Wars movie with them. But they are kind of capable of speaking, apparently. It's just it's not their usual way of approaching things.
I get a feeling it's probably quite painful for them to try and talk.
At least it sounds like it.
Yeah.
Sounds like they're mistreating their throat in some kind of way to produce these noises.
The other really, really interesting thing about these, when it comes to kind of like the modern myth behind them, is that they apparently don't just try and eat people, they also like to try and kidnap children and replace them with ghoul children, so that those children are then raised in humanity. What do you think of that?
It sounds weird because especially I also heard the story that they do not only replace the children with their own, but also the children that they steal are somehow transformed into ghouls. So I don't know what to make of this entire thing. It seems like one more of these, I don't know, maybe mistranslations or someone misunderstood something. It always sounded kind of weird to me.
Yeah, I personally agree, and as much fun as it might be to get the research department to look into that one, I don't think we'll get ethical approval for giving over a couple of human children to ghouls to see if they...
It'd be hard to justify that study.
Yeah, well, I mean, when they turn around and ask you what are the possible results, child gets turned into a ghoul or child gets eaten by ghoul. The null hypothesis wouldn't be good.
That's true. Yeah, that's why our knowledge on certain beings is still limited, because there's just no real sensible way that we can verify some of our beliefs. So
there's a lot of we still have to jump through ethical hoops when it comes down to it.
Exactly.
But yeah, it's more interesting if we move on now to kind of why this is partly our origin story as a pair. So it wasn't that long after I had been a part of the organisation, probably a few years in, and I'd been attached to what we kind of know as our investigation group. So just like anything, there's always rumours, there's always reports here and there, you'd be surprised how much we find off Reddit.
Yeah.
But we need people to go out there and find out, is it real or is it mundane? So we do have quite a large kind of investigations group. And a lot of people most people within the organisation will work in the investigations group at some point. It's kind of part of the progression of the team. But yeah, I had been sent towards where you had been stationed by pure dumb chance, that we had received some reports of occasional kind of disturbed cemetery sites, which always immediately concerns any of us.
Exactly.
They don't even have to be a member of the CCI to be able to be worried by that. But there's a huge number of creatures that potentially could be disturbing burial sites.
Yeah.
We need to be on top of that straight away because obviously the police get very, very concerned if they think grave robbers are in the area. Again, quite rightly so.
Yeah.
But if we're dealing with one of our interesting suspects, that could end very, very badly for everyone involved.
Exactly. That's why, even if it's not confirmed yet, and they usually also send out a containment team already, which is why I was there. The way it works is usually when you start out, you have to go through basic training and theoretical exams and stuff like that, and then you do tours as part of a containment team. And I was actually towards the end of my training period, so I was leading a containment group that was called there to deal with whatever might be causing the reports about missing people and graveyards and grave robbery and whatever was going on there. So that's how we ended up being in the same place.
Yeah, we obviously I was the investigator in the area and coordinating with the containment team. And as Chris says, the containment team tends to be one of the parts that you're in towards the end of your training. Even as investigators, yes, I might have been part of the CCI for a little bit longer, but you definitely defer back to the containment team. I'm just there as the advisor. It's well, you're gonna get very, very drawn in and work very closely with the members of your containment team, don't you? I mean, I'm sure you've got some great memories of that lot.
Yeah, and it's always a bit of teamwork. It's in many cases it's a bit of a brain and brawn type of deal. So you figure out what's going on and why it's going on, and I, or the containment team back then, we deal with, as the name says, containing the threat, so nobody gets hurt more than is necessary. We can't always fully prevent everything from happening, but of course we do our best to keep everyone on their side of the fence, so to say.
Very much so. The other thing with the investigations group, as Chris says, we are a lot more. We go in, we find out, we look into the sightings, we look into the dangers, we try and identify what we're dealing with and advise you guys. But at the same time, we also try and deal with the locals.
Yeah.
in a way, especially a lot of the time with police, or unfortunately, as we had with this one, sometimes the criminals that might be involved.
It's surprisingly often that criminals are involved in some way in our work. Not from our side, but we kind of cross paths with them surprisingly often.
Yeah, it's quite often how they'll find something interesting, and instead of the interesting aspects of the science or what they are, or just the wonder that comes from these creatures sometimes, they more see profit.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, what we actually found with this one was we found a group of criminals who weren't even aware that they were dealing with ghouls in the first place. We looked into it and found grave robbers. They'd found a very old tomb, burial site, that kind of thing, somewhere very ancient, which obviously then usually has a bunch of antiques, jewellery, weaponry, all these kind of things that can sell to museums and universities and whatnot for huge amounts of money, or into the hands of collectors. And they started disturbing it, but unfortunately they ended up opening a few ways into a buried ghoul lair.
Yes. Usually we wouldn't interfere with the grave robbers doing whatever they're doing because it's not our area of expertise. And
yeah, we'd just get the information, send it over to the police, and go home.
Exactly, but in that case, they had found something more than they bargained for. So suddenly we were involved.
Yeah. I'll say it's a wonder that none of them actually got eaten.
I still don't know how they managed to avoid that.
Yeah. I mean, I understand how they avoided it when we arrived, but beforehand, God knows. But yeah, they've been. What we tend to find with ghouls is usually on burial sites and things like that. If they're haunting those kind of areas, tend to be disturbed graves, bones moved around, exhumed coffins, unfortunately, that kind of thing. Basically damage and destruction.
Yeah.
Looks a little bit like vandalism to a certain degree,
Yes.
but usually you then find claw marks, bite marks that, again, most of the time get mistaken for, scavengers.
Yeah.
Which technically they're not wrong. Ghouls kind of are scavengers to a
That's
certain
true.
degree, but they're also hunters.
Also, of course, it was good for us that they were mistaken for something mundane, so we had a easier time covering it up.
Obviously, my part in this was to investigate. I found where we were going and identified that we were probably dealing with a bunch of ghouls, which, like I say, basically ruined my day. At that point, though, I pretty much hand off to you. I basically bounced around the place trying to keep as quiet as I could. Last thing I want to do is disturb the grave robbers, let alone the ghouls. But moving around, trying to block little ways here and there, move some debris in the way, make some weird noises here and there, while trying to keep quiet enough that I don't attract the ghouls, and pretty much just try and get the local authorities down as quickly as possible. But what were you up to while I was playing Vigilante?
Yeah, I was. While you were Vigilante, I was playing Soldier, more or less, and we set up our base of operations near where the site of the ghouls was, where we knew that their lair was. And they're quite aggressive creatures, so we had to take care, and it looked almost like a military operation at points. And yeah, as I said before, we all were armed with firearms, rifles, and whatnot, because even if you shoot them, that's not immediately gonna stop them, but at least it's gonna make them reconsider running towards you. And
yeah, you try and discourage them, don't you?
Exactly. And one of the better ways to discourage them is I think you mentioned before that they avoid daylight usually. They're more nocturnal creatures. And with our limited testing, obviously, because they're so aggressive, we don't have them in our labs very often. But what we were able to figure out is that they are very sensitive to UV light specifically. So what we did was around the area, we set up the equivalent of like these football there's light towers.
Oh, floodlights.
Yeah, floodlights. Sorry.
Small portable floodlights, isn't it?
Exactly.
They're kind of very direct.
Yeah, big lights, as big as we could manage to ship there in time. And we focused on trying to direct these lights at all of the entrances or exits we could find to dissuade them from leaving the area and going into the town that wasn't far away. And that was our strategy in the first part. And then, of course, problem is there are a lot of ways they can get in and out of their lair. And what we then had to do was we methodically mapped out where the entrances were, and we had to block them up. So we had these... it's like a bit like bricks, but more moldable. It's basically a way to quickly seal something up. It's not meant to last forever, but we can block an entrance up. There are UV lights integrated into the blocks. They have battery powers in case the power gets cut off. And we use these to block the entrances that we could find, so they had less and less, or fewer and fewer ways to get out of the lair. And the more we did that, of course, the easier it was to control. because as Jack said before, they are very sneaky, and obviously the more routes they have to get to you or to the town or anywhere they want, the harder it is to spot them. So yeah, we basically spend our every waking moment trying to block these entrances, and of course they did not like that, and every now and then they would try to attack us. We all had our personal UV torches on our persons, which sometimes worked, sometimes not. We were authorized to shoot them if we had to, which we did, and usually we did not aim to kill, but it was unavoidable that there was some creatures that we had to kill there. It was not a pretty sight. I didn't really like that assignment very much.
Yeah, we don't really class them as endangered or aggressive and dangerous.
Yeah, they're not endangered, but I never liked killing anything, if it's endangered or not, or however aggressive it is. It's just its nature. It's not like it's personal towards me. It's just if it's us or them, then I'm choosing us.
Well, the most annoying part about this whole one was the fact that we had to work around, members of the public, criminals, but members of the public specifically. Normally, we would get this all locked up. I would work with the containment team admin, shall we say, to try and keep the people away while you guys do your thing. But in this one, obviously we couldn't just come in, bulldoze into the scene, take complete control, set things up nice and quickly. So we did, unfortunately, have a few moving around, and it took us a little while. We had to wait. We had to wait for the police to get there to arrest the robbers, and we had to wait for the police to leave. It was a couple of days' job, this one, and it was not fun. But it was one of the first times I had worked as an investigator with such an efficient kind of containment team that it's kind of how our friendship started.
You're
That's how our friendship started. While you were with the containment teams,
that's true.
for a while, it was one of the you were my go-to guy as when I was an investigator. It's nice working with someone who knows what they're doing. Not to say that the rest of them don't know what they're doing, but it was just it was the right partnership for the job.
Yeah, exactly. I can only return the compliment. We were a great team. You did a great job at dealing with the grave robbers and securing the site and all that stuff. And it just worked out pretty great, and we noticed that we worked well together as a team. So from then on, if there was a two-person job, we often worked together just because we realized that, I realized that you were good at what you do, and we can trust each other. We know how we
operate.
We know how the other one operates, and
it just worked well. But that's Ghouls, and that's our lovely little Halloween special for you. How spooky was that? But
very
we
spooky.
occasionally, around the right times of year, we're going to throw in a occasional special here and there.
Yeah, you might want to tune in for the Christmas special. It's gonna be wild.
Can you guess who it was? Ho ho ho!
No spoilers.
Yeah. But
or was it?
But thank you very much for listening. If you enjoyed that, do all the socials. Give us a rating. Come and join the team and join in with the Discord, which I hope you would love. We've got a small little community. We're going to keep trying to build it so you can all have a bit of discussion, find other people who are learning about the new world out there. In the meantime, thank you very much for listening, and goodbye.
Goodbye.